Thank you, everybody. I just want to make it clear that I'm not actually a scientist. I'm a landholder in the South East Natural Resources Management region. I've been reviewing the science on underground gas mining. Because this is a science conference, my talk highlights the lack of science guiding rapid development of the underground gas industry. We are now seeing impacts in the eastern states. 20 toxic spills at Narrabri, contaminated aquifers, animals dying and calves being born blind. The HDPE pond liners in the southeast broke down in less than 4 years. No one can guarantee well integrity. 30% of the farmers in the NRM region in the southeast depend on irrigation for pastures, livestock, grapes, fruit or vegetables. In 2011, $1 billion worth of food, fibre and wine was produced. It is important to maintain a clean green image for export markets. Productivity of agricultural land and tourism industries are threatened by proposed unconventional gas mining. It has impacted industries in New South Wales, Queensland, Canada, the US and other places. Let's look back to the impacts of well drilling on my neighbouring surrounding properties in the southeast. In 1979, Western Mining were very excited to find lignite northwest of Kingston southeast. 950 drill holes were commissioned. Pumping tests were done for 8 days for removal of water surrounding the lignite. This affected the artesian water. One bore ceased to flow. Kingston's town water would have been at risk if the project had continued because of interconnection between the Mapunga and Doowan aquifers. In the South East NRM region, there is a thin layer of primary agricultural land that sits over limestone, which is porous and brittle. Natural subsidence in the region has resulted in hundreds of sinkholes. Drilling and hydraulic fracture stimulation, also known as fracking, in limestone areas increases the risk of subsidence and impacts on water resources. No one can guarantee well integrity. The petroleum industry requires huge amounts of water, sand and chemicals pumped down through a drill hole to release methane from highly impervious shale or tight rock through hydraulic fracture stimulation. The type of fracking performed now is multi-stage, slick water, horizontal, high volume, high pressure fracking, which has only been around since 2003. Multi-well pads have only been used since 2007. There are still many unknowns of impacts down the track. Drill holes penetrate aquifers and geological formations, and there are risks to water resources that are poorly understood. Drill holes are known to break down over time. There is clear evidence of it in the South East NRM region. In 2014, exploration drilling began for shale gas with 2 deep wells around 4 kilometres deep near Penola by Beach Energy. The industry cannot guarantee well integrity. Government scientists highlight that declines in water levels increase the risk of seawater intrusion in the Donovan's management area to the south of Mount Gambier. Some movement of salt-water interface has occurred in deep observation wells. The science indicates the risk of seawater of intrusion increases as a result of over-allocation of bore water. Water resources in the South East NRM region are already under pressure. The region cannot tolerate the additional risks posed by underground gas mining. It is apparent that the water table and water quality monitoring have not taken place for long enough to ensure that seawater is not intruding in some areas. The past president of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, Professor Bill Fisher, warned never to drill near faults. Pathways can occur, allowing leakage of contaminants from deep under the ground up into the aquifers. Drilling or injecting wastewater near or going through a fault may increase the risk of earthquakes. This is a graph on how earthquakes have increased in Oklahoma since re-injection of wastewater. The Seismological Society of America showed that fracking process itself is responsible for a series of earthquakes in Ohio. In the last 6 months, 12 earthquakes have occurred in the southeast. Beach Energy Limited has drilled through vertical fault lines that rise upwards into the confined aquifer. Extensive science that indicates such drilling and wastewater re-injection increases the risk of earthquakes and opportunities for mining contaminants to leak into our aquifers. No one can guarantee well integrity. It is not acceptable that wastewater has been spread on agricultural land in the southeast. The wastewater from the shale exploration had very high salinity levels and contained polyaromatic hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds, heavy metals and radionuclides. The red coin effect occurs as the gas depletes in wells and sweet spots are once more looked for. Cumulative effects need to be taken into account, especially with the 3,446 drill holes predicted for the Otway Basin by a government study. A personal example of a hydrology observation drill hole on my neighbour's property was commissioned in 1982. It subsided down 20 metres, which penetrated the unconfined aquifer. This undoubtedly increases the risk of subsidence. As the aquifer levels drop, because of less rainfall recharge, the roof of the aquifer becomes exposed, the limestone dries out and becomes brittle. No well comes with a guarantee of its integrity, neither during the drilling phase nor in 100 years. Wells that we drill today will be there forever. The science that underpins unconventional gas mining is poor, but clear that as time goes by, the risk of well failure increases, particularly in areas that are as seismically active as the South East NRM region. Casings and cement are no match for geological processes, especially with additional corrosion caused by hydrogen sulfide and anaerobic bacteria. No one can control what is happening under the ground. South Australia is the driest state in the driest inhabited continent in the world. Our groundwater is too precious to gamble with. The science simply does not provide the insurance required to support this industry. No one can guarantee well integrity. I will leave you with a quote from Scott Ashby, former Chief Executive for the Department of Water, SA, and current Chief Executive of PIRSA. Healthy water is fundamental to our way of life and environment. It underpins our economy and growth in population, which are critical to South Australia's future prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And once again, well kept to time, so we've got time for some questions. Questions for Anne?
I became involved in this in 2007, and we had a proposed lignite gasification mine next to our property in the southeast. Through science, I'm on the agricultural representative on the round table for oil and gas projects in South Australia, and through lobbying at that round table and presenting the geological science of what had happened before with the water problems from the pumping and also the subsidence, the company eventually pulled the plug on it for me. So the situation is, at the moment, we have a current inquiry into fracking in the southeast, and we're to find out in around the middle of the year what they decide. I think it needs to be a ban. We're hoping for a moratorium and that common sense will prevail here.
Any other questions? Yes?
It's set up by the NRM committee, the state committee in Parliament. So there's a number of politicians on that round table doing the inquiry, along with a researcher. Around mid-year is what we've been told. So, and I continually keep feeding them information all the time of you know, the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. And in fact, I've just returned from the top of New South Wales a couple of days ago, meeting with farmers that have been impacted there. And around the chinchilla area, their animals are just dying. The cows must be pumped up with gas. It's the only way I could explain this. They're dying with their 4 legs up in the air. There's been, through the gasification, underground gasification and coal seam gas, there's been now 1,000 pigs died on the Bender property. The calves are actually being born blind. It's just gone from one disaster to another, as well as shocking health impacts on the communities up there as well.
Jerry, last question.
And what scientific investigations are you recommending should occur to fully investigate?
There's already been a number of scientific investigations done on this industry. There's been 400 peer-reviewed papers released in America. One of the doctors involved in the Tara area is keeping a lot of statistics and things. Basically, I think the science is that where there is limestone, which is prone to subsidence and sinkholes and exacerbated by mining, drilling and fracking, or where there is the fault lines, which I've explained, or where there's a risk of seawater intrusion, because you've got to remember they use water out of the ground and something's got to fill that void. If they're getting it from deeper aquifers that are more saline and toxic, that's still bringing that water to the surface. You've got the well integrity. There's 6% of wells they've found break down in the first year. I know there's a lot of well integrity problems in the eastern states from what I hear from my colleagues and friends. So I think the geological science is in, and where I'd like to see the law changed is adding in where there is those issues, particularly for prime agricultural land, then that land should be exempt.
Okay, we'll leave it there.